everybody, and thank you all for coming, particularly for joining us in the first week of term, when I'm sure you've all had a busy week and you're probably exhausted. I know I am, so it's great to see so many faces here. And we will just start by just reminding everybody about who the NEU Left are. So we are a group of people who, a group of activists, who really want to establish change in the union. And so we are a left caucus and we have shared visions and values. So tonight's meeting is all about this return to school. So as you all, I'm sure know, we have had a busy few weeks getting ready for the start of term. And there's been so much going on. So really what we want tonight is to hear from members, reps in schools. We want to find out what's going on in different parts of the country. And we want to know if things are going well, then we want to hear from you. Or if things are not so great, we also want to hear from you. If you've got any questions or concerns, then we'd love you to share those with us and we can try and answer those or maybe get a bit of a discussion going. And you can do that by raising your hand. So if you click on the participants list, then there'll be a little blue button and you can raise your hand if you want to say something, or you can type your comment or your question into the chat at the bottom. Again, there's a button that you click on that says chat, and then you can type in there. And we've got people monitoring the chat, so they'll be sharing your questions and your comments, but we really would like to hear from members and activists. So we'd love you to raise your hand and then you can talk to us about what's going on in your district or in your school. So we are 1 week just into the new term and we really just want to take stock of where we are, how things have gone over the past few days, and how reps are getting on, particularly. How are your members feeling in school? Has anyone had members meeting? And has anyone got any issues or any questions? So we have got a couple of reps who are going to talk to us about what's been going on in their schools. And then we're going to open up the floor and we'd love to hear from people of what's going on. So we're going to start with Emma Davis, who is going to tell us about what she's been doing in her school. She has got a great win that she's going to share with us. So there you are, Emma.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. Yeah, and just to echo, thanks everybody for coming on the call tonight. You know, it's certainly incredibly different times than even, you know, when we were meeting together in the summer term. And so I think, yeah, things have changed. And, you know, I've been thinking a lot about actually the Italian revolutionary Antonio Gramsci and how he talked about the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. And it can actually really feel that way, I think, at the moment, you know, that we are living through an incredibly difficult period punctuated by lots of fear and, manifestations, seeing how the system is really failing. And so that's kind of where I want to start and sorry, I should have introduced myself. I'm a rep, a primary school rep in a school in Barking and Dagenham. I'm part of NEU Left steering group. And, you know, I really feel that throughout this whole crisis of the pandemic and before, it's the government who's failed. And throughout the summer, you know, Boris Johnson was saying, you know, it's the moral duty of teachers and educators. It's their moral duty to be back in schools. And really, I feel like what we're about and what the union's about is saying, no, the moral duty is on the Tories, on the government to make the changes needed and to invest properly to make it so that we can open schools and keep schools open in a safe way. And that's what the NEU Left Bulletin, if people haven't seen it, really outlines. It's what our vision is of what we feel is needed in order to keep schools open. Also, you know, the Invest Now campaign, which is really, it looks like just come out today with a series of really clear postcards which reps can use in their school, put them up on the staff board, send them to Boris Johnson, and it's saying this is what we need the government to do to be allowed to allow for us to keep schools open, to make, if we have to go into blended learning, to make that possible. Things like free laptops for every student, more investment for space so that we can have smaller class sizes where we can socially distance. They made Nightingale hospitals. Could they make Nightingale schools? And then a very comprehensive system of testing, which Boris Johnson has kind of talked about today, that they might be looking to have a much more extensive testing program. And we say, well, that's great, but make that real, and make that happen now. And with the announcement of the further restrictions yesterday and lockdown in places like Bolton, I think that really everything that the government is saying can feel very disingenuous for people in schools at the moment. It feels strange that we can be in classes of 30 in my school with no social distancing amongst the younger kids, and yet we can't go to the pub on a Friday with the school and decompress about the week, or we can't go and meet up. If it was a staff member's birthday today, and we were kind of laughing that we could all sing him happy birthday in the staff room, but then tonight he's going home and he's only going to see his parents, and he can't have a party or anything. And so we do want schools open. We believe schools are an incredibly important place for kids to come together. And actually, my own experience has been quite heart-wrenching over the last few days, watching children who haven't played together for several months being able to go out on the playground. I'm actually getting a bit emotional about it because it's been really lovely to see. But we want them open in conditions that are actually safe for people. And so, part of what we're talking about as well is, a proper plan B. And we need a trigger that says, this is the point when we need to go into that blended learning. This is the point when those people who are very high risk need to go home, because none of us wants to go into the next term having lost a workmate or having had people who shouldn't have got ill. And I think it's important that we do know that we still do have Section 44 in our back pocket, that we used it before effectively to help to defend our health and safety, and that's something which we can do. Now, in my school, we have been organising since lockdown alongside the GMB, where they hadn't been very well organised, but they've got much better organised now. So I think that helps make us quite strong. And that means that my head teacher really does listen to what the union has to say as well now. I think the fact that 50 of us put a name to a letter saying that we weren't going to go in on the 1st of June, I think that made, gave us a bit of leverage really. But she's also a union member and she's quite sympathetic. And we had a 4-day week in the summer term when we were in with smaller bubbles. And the union group said we'd like to keep that in the new academic year. And when she came back in September, each teacher has now secured an entire day off a week for PPA. And that can be used in whatever the way they choose, CPD, and also that can be taken from home. And that's meant to really address the concerns around teacher workload. And I think that, that really should be a model. And yes, that's down to a strong union group, but it's also down to a visionary head teacher who actually saw the fact that when we were at home throughout lockdown, we were actually very, very efficient and people were getting more done when they were at home. And it's made a huge difference. Like, teachers just feel like a lot of weight has been lifted from their shoulders. Now, also around the checklist has been met as far as we can see at my school, and when there are concerns, they've been addressed. We're doing stuff around Black Lives Matter as well, where we hadn't really in the past. So today we did a minute of silence for George Floyd, because the inquest into his death. So I feel like the work we've done around the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, has fed into the work that we're doing around the pandemic of racism. But I want to be really honest. It's not like everything's ideal at my school. We don't, some of the things that we said that we'd have on the checklist haven't been there this week. So we're having to meet with my head teacher and say, where are those anti-bac wipes in the staff room? Where is the PPA for some staff, PPE, sorry, for some staff? And also there is now an issue with teaching assistants, where yes, it's great, we've won a day of PPA for teachers, but actually teaching assistants are feeling really overwhelmed by the whole situation. So we need a way of making sure that they're being recognised as well. And I just want to finish off by saying, you know, as educators, we really do have a dual role in society. And I think that's really clear at the moment. You know, on the one hand, you know, for a lot of us, we're in it because we love working with kids and we want to help them develop in a really holistic way. We want to help to liberate young minds. We want to decolonize the curriculum. You know, we want LGBTQ plus inclusive schools. There are all these great reasons why we're in school. But at the same time, we know that they play a very, very crucial economic role for the system of capitalism, for keeping the economy going, for pressuring people back into work at the moment. And that's certainly the way that the Tories have taken it in the direction. And the whole fiasco around testing has really exposed, you know, what their priorities are with education. So, you know, I think that we have to keep saying that we want to be in school. We see the important, yes, academic, but also social role that schools play for kids. They are so important. We want our schools to be safe for the long term. So that's why it's really important that in our union, we're having these discussions to make sure that we can fight for that better future.
Thanks so much, Emma. That was really powerful to hear and a great way to start our meeting. And can I just say congratulations on your win of a whole day of PPA. And I think it just shows the power of having a strong members group and, you know, a rep who really listens to members and works with members and with SLT to bring about positive changes. And that actually, you know, we can all do that if we work in our schools with our members and collectivise. And also that, you know, your point about, you know, the wider issues of testing and everything, really important too. So thank you so much for starting us off, Emma. We're going to move on. We've got Vic who's speaking next, but if anybody wants to comment on anything that Emma said, please do either write it in the chat or put your hand up to speak. I've got Vic, and then after Vic I've got Trish. So I'm just going to, oh, you're already unmuted, Vic, so over to you.
Yeah, thank you, comrades. Just really sort of speak about sort of the experiences over during the pandemic briefly, but more what I want to sort of really speak about is the challenges we have ahead and how we get there. So without my Academy Trust, we did an incredible amount of organising during the pandemic, during lockdown, holding virtual meetings in schools as well as between reps, and that sort of being successful in terms of winning full pay for agency workers and supply workers, winning full sick pay. COVID didn't count towards absence reporting, like real material gains at both local and trust level, as well as clinically vulnerable workers being able to work from home, as well as black educators, if they wanted to, have the option to work from home as well. So throughout that, we saw our rep density increase from around 50% to 90%. Across the 25 odd schools across the country, is a really high number, and hours of organising went into that. So what was quite interesting sort of this week being back is actually seeing members face to face, because what we want to move towards is a rank and file organising approach, where instead of having an active lead union rep who's in contact with the head teacher or with the CEO, actually now we're back in the workplace. It's about empowering members. So what we've done is in our school, we sort of really wanted to have, we call them NEU champions in every department. So that point of contact would be responsible for passing on union communications, talking about the union, as well as unionising people who aren't in the NEU. So that's been really successful as well. Also, identify members who are active during the pandemic as potential leaders. So we've sort of included them in our committee. We've set up a school union equalities working group, because these are members who are really interested around Black Lives Matters. So whilst they're not out and out workplace reps, they've got a place in terms of the decision making in the union. And from that, we've launched a campaign around anti-racism, really pushing a union-led whole school approach using the anti-racist framework that's led by the trade union, because as a school group, and as sort of Emma mentioned around June the 1st, in our school, we had something like 50 odd, similar to Emma's number, who put their name to a letter saying, no, we're not opening on June the 1st. And our head teacher knows that, because the school knows we've got the capacity to escalate on other issues as well as around anti-racism, but also around health and safety. Really huge issue around COVID in terms of risk assessment, making sure that they're followed and they're adhered to as well. Because what we can do is we can say to the head teacher, well, if it's a no, then we'll go tell all our members and we'll do something about it. So that's really, really powerful. That's really important. So we had our first members meeting in school today, had its biggest ever attendance. Virtually every department in the school was represented. It was really, rather than me sort of just giving key messages, it was really sort of two-way in terms of members saying, what was really promising was, you'd have members say, I spoke to the members in my department and this is what we think. So sort of encouraging whole sort of a rank and file organising approach to trade unionism. And I think in terms of the NEU left, we've got to have a real strong turn to schools, because as brilliant as our campaign was in the summer, where it could have been better was a stronger union president on the ground. And ultimately, if we're going to have real big wins that's going to have long-lasting change in terms of assessments around decolonise the curriculum, in terms of abolishing performance-related pay and other marketisation reforms and measures, how are we going to do that is by building, like I said, a rank and file movement in our union. So if you are a member on this and you're not a school rep, become the rep in your school. If you are a rep in your school, become an active rep. Encourage every meetings every half term. Really encourage taking really an organising approach to that. And on that, the NEU, we're working alongside other unions in this country and across the globe. We're running organiser training in September and October. It's Organised for Power. It's the summer strike school. That rank and file NEU members been trained alongside Jane McAlevey over the summer. I'll make sure I'll post the link in there. So if you're in a multi-academy trust, and you're in a group of reps, sign up to it. Really encouraging groups of reps do it. If you're in a school with a groups of reps, or potentially, sign up to it. Now's the opportunity now to build on having those 20,000 extra members, having those 3,000 extra members, and really building significant long-lasting change, not only in our education system, but in society as well. And on that, you've got to have a really big drive towards organising the unorganised as well. So, for example, supply workers and agency workers, it's time we start really supporting them, developing their own autonomy in terms of their right and their precarity, because these are people that are most suppressed within our education system as well. And I think also, particularly, in terms of future of our union, is around bargaining for the common good. So there's opportunities for our union to link together workplace and community struggles. There's a huge number of community organising groups around anti-racism. We should be working with them. Okay, our members in another area will be facing evictions during this pandemic. We need to be encouraging our members, our tenants, to be joining tenant unions. We need to be encouraging them to join actions in our districts. We need to be sort of building not only workplace power and community power as well. And that's something we're doing in our own district. I'm happy to sort of post through some motions in the sort of in the chat as well, because ultimately, any sort of change, it's got to come from us. It's not going to come. It's not going to fall in our lap. And during a period of crisis, there's also opportunity as well. And for us to build on these gains over the pandemic, we've got to have, like I said, turn towards the school, the workplace, and organising. Because ultimately, if we build that strength as workers collectively, they can have some real significant societal change. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vic. Loads of really great points there. I was scribbling some notes down as you were speaking. And I think what you said about empowering members is so important, and that we get people involved and active in their union, that they see that they can be part of a movement. And I agree with you on the organising for power training with Jane McAlevey, really, really useful stuff. So do keep an eye.
Oops, Lucy, I think you're muted.
Sorry, thank you, Emma. I was saying, do keep an eye on the chat, because there's lots of good links going in there and some good discussion. Somebody's highlighted the anti-racism charter, which has been shared in the chat, so do have a look at that and get discussing that in your districts and in your schools with your members. So thanks Emma and Vic for getting us off to a great start on how having an organised members group in your school and in your district can really help to win in the workplace. And I'm going to hand over to Trish now, who had her hand up, so I'm going to unmute Trish. I think somebody, there we go.
Hello. I just want to, not everything's doom and gloom. I'm very, very proud that our school at the moment is doing everything that it should. We've recently amalgamated, and our infant and nursery and junior department are on 3 different sites. And I was the rep, I'm a teaching assistant in Durham, and I was the rep for the infant department, and consequently when we amalgamated, I've become rep for everybody. Since I found out who was actually on the list of NEU members, I've introduced them to each other, because in the junior department, a lot of them didn't realise that they were in the same union because they've never had a rep there to discuss things with. They have now. The head teacher is quite a new one, and at the beginning of lockdown, I made sure that all the NEU information was passed on to her, even though she's not a member of the NEU. And her first question was, how many members have you? And when I told her, and she realised that good 2/3 of her staff are NEU, she became very compliant, which is very, very nice. And she's been so good. In Durham, the district secretaries in Durham have worked their socks off during the lockdown period. We've had regular Zoom meetings, not just for reps and members, but also for parents and carers to share information, and several leaders Zoom meetings, which have been opened up to all leaders, no matter which union they belong to. So everybody was informed about what was going on. And my head has been super. She's followed all the checklists that I passed on. Every bit of information has been shared to all the staff. We went back to school last week, and we have had really, really surprising to find that all the children walked in as if they'd just had a weekend off. They didn't react as if they'd been away for months. They just came in, sat down, carried on talking. We've managed to spread the classrooms out, so there is room in between each desk. Our bubbles are in year groups, so the children have a year group bubble for break time, for lunch time. They're all separate, and at the moment it's working well. All 3 departments have had a new cleaner employed to do cleaning as and when through the day, which is fantastic. Break time, she nips in and wipes all the tables. When the children are in lessons, she goes in and does the toilets. And we've been extremely lucky that our head has been able to do as much as she has on our behalf. The only problem we've got at the moment is trying to get the parents to behave as sensibly as the children, because it's the parents who don't believe in social distancing and stand in the little groups. And we try so hard. The children have listened and understood what we're telling them, and then they go out and they find their parents all stood together, and it's as if it doesn't really matter. But that's something we don't have any control about, other than regular letters on the school Facebook page and school website. That's another. At the beginning of lockdown, I asked if I could start a Facebook page, because our parents all are Facebook addicts. but not very many actually look at the school website. Whereas if we put the information and the work on the Facebook page with a link, they all get the notifications for Facebook and found their way to the work a lot easier than we would expecting them to go to the school website. It also aroused a lot of competition, because a lot of parents that we didn't think would take the time to do the work at home, because they had Facebook that they could pass the work on to us to add on, delighted in taking photos of their children doing lots of activities that we're very pleased that they took part in. In school, we now have regular meetings with the NEU members, but it is a bit difficult because at the moment, like I said, we're on 3 separate sites. The new building is at the back of us, being erected as I speak, and should be ready to move into all in one building next Easter. Fingers crossed for weather and builders not being let us get too far behind. And it will be a lot easier to have meetings with everybody. As for what else have we done? Each classroom has its own British values notice board, and we've made sure that the Black Lives Matter are included in that. Plus, we've started the Educate and Celebrate, which the children are loving. They take it in their stride. They don't see that stories have all male families and all female families. They just take it for granted. And by starting them off young, listening to stories, it's just a matter of fact for them, which is how it should be.
Thank you, Trish.
Sorry.
No, that's great. And it's really, thank you. Did you want to add anything else?
No, I'm sorry, I'm just rabbiting.
No, it's really good to hear how things are going. And actually, it's really good to hear the positives as well. And I think it just shows the importance of working with school leaders, because an awful lot of, we have to remember that this is new for them. They've been thrown in the deep end as much as we have. And so it's really good to hear of cases of head teachers and union reps working really well together and getting some positive things from that. Thanks so much, Trish, for your contribution. I'm going to bring Corinne in next. She's got her hand up. Let's see.
Hello. Hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you for having me here. I am a teacher. I'm not teaching at the moment. I think, well, once you've done a PGC, you're a teacher for life, aren't you? You can't get away from that. So, so yeah, I'm here in my capacity as, well, a campaigner, an activist, I suppose. I'm one of the admins and organisers for a campaign group called Brutus Parents United, and I'm here with Gemma. There are a number of us who set up the campaign, and we're now kind of 10,000 plus parents strong, and well, I suppose not just parents, teachers, teaching assistants, concerned members of the community. And essentially what we're trying to do is to support the drive to have a sensible, safe and sustainable return to school and education for absolutely everybody. Anyone who has any contact with school, essentially. And so I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that both Vic and Emma kind of really quite rightly stated during their kind of speech. Vic, you're absolutely right. Like the idea that as kind of educators, and as I'm no longer part of the NEU at the moment because I'm not teaching, but and as NEU members, yeah, it's about touching base with community groups that are organising. It's really, really important to have that kind of network and those links. And that's, I suppose, why I'm here today with Gemma as well, because we want to link up with you guys, because you as educators, as teachers, as classroom teachers, as TAs, as head teachers, have been stuck between a rock and a really hard place. It is horrendous. My sister's a teacher. She's gone back to school this week, and it must be just overwhelming. So firstly, I do want to kind of send a message of solidarity to you guys, because what you're doing is heroic, and what the government have tried to do consistently is to pit parents against teachers and vilify teachers and label you as us as lazy and special. We are special, but everybody needs that safety at work. And what you were saying, Emma, about it being the kind of the floodgates opening, if we accept a lower standard of health and safety and a lower standard at schools, what we're doing is we're opening the floodgates to say that's okay for everybody. And the campaign that you guys ran as part of the June campaign, No Return on the 1st of June, was exceptional, and it was incredible, the result that you got. And so, you know, Emma picked up on the point that, you know, we need to have a trigger for when there is a time to say, you know, it's not safe for certain people to be at school. It's now we need to kick in with blended learning. And we've seen that those ideas from Independent Sage, and that's something that our campaign's worked really, really hard on, which Gem's going to talk about in a second. But what we've tried to do is to empower parents to have a voice in opening the lines of communications with school, but also in being able to support you guys in what you're fighting for as well. Parents aren't unionised, you guys are. So what we're trying to push for is kind of in line with it. It is supporting you and hopefully safeguarding you at work as well. And what we're trying to do is kind of develop this blended learning approach, so that we can have safety at work, at your work, for our children, for everybody. And that's only going to happen if we work together and if we formulate those links between everybody. And suppose finally, I did just want to say, as an ex-teacher, as a teacher, but as a parent, you know, and as a campaigner, we have heard some really, really quite harrowing stories, case studies from parents, from teachers and from teaching assistants and from head teachers, and we need to stay sharply focused our energies, not on fighting each other, which is what the government wants us to do, but on fighting the government. And we can do that if we band together and if we have our collective energies, and that's parents, that's teachers, that's cleaners, it's bus drivers, it's TAs, it's the cooks, it's, you know, the caretakers, everybody. And we're with you.
Thanks so much, Corinne. That's really great to hear, and really lovely to hear from parents that are, you know, sending us support and solidarity, because, as you say, you know, the government and the mainstream media would have us thinking that all parents are against educators. And so it's good to hear that there are parents out there supporting us, and we would, as a group, we would love to work with any other organisations that want to support our work and our campaigns. So thanks so much for that. And I'm just going to encourage anybody who is a rep in a school or thinking about becoming a rep in a school to please put your hand up if you want to say something, and do share what's going on in your school, whether it's good or bad, or if you've got questions, and we can try and answer them. So Jess has had her hand up for ages, so I'm going to unmute Jess so that she can, I think she's got something to share with us.
Hey Lucy, thank you. Yeah, it's really great to hear the experiences of reps in schools doing that absolute crucial job of trying to keep our schools as safe as possible. And I think, you know, in the last few weeks, even over this summer, it's been like at the forefront of everybody's mind, hasn't it? And I think just listening, like my school is very much perhaps like Trish's, where you feel like people are genuinely really trying to do everything they can, and you can tick all kinds of things off on the risk assessment, and well, everything off on the risk assessment. But the reality of it is people still don't feel very safe. And the reason they don't feel very safe is because lots of the stuff around the virus is out of the school's control. It doesn't matter how tight your bubbles are or how you know, how much social distancing there is. The government strategy is just so fundamentally flawed that they will cause further lockdowns and they will cause further school closures. And so I think it's time, and I think it fits with the organising strategy that Vic outlined as well, to in addition to all of the school safety stuff, to have a bit of a mind about how can we create a campaign. And I think here is where the NEU left fits really well, is how do we have a campaign that mobilises members within schools around key demands against the government. So the stuff about, you know, if we have to move to blended learning, which let's face it, you know, I'd bet money on it, we'd all bet money on it. If we have to do that, how do we keep our kids learning? Because, you know, as much as we all tried, I've got to be honest, I don't think kids got much of an education at all before, and we do want them to still continue to get an education, and that does depend on whether they have access to the equipment that they need, whether they've got Wi-Fi and whether they've got laptops, and that takes investment. You know, and the other thing about space and staff, you know, that we need more staff in our schools and we need more space, and that again takes investment from the government. We can't do anything about that as reps with our head and putting pressure on our head to create more. We can't do anything about that. So I think it's time for a little bit, I want to put an argument, I guess, I think it's time for a bit of a shift in our sort of, not message, in our operation, to say on the ground, can we get members to take part in things that raise the demands on the government? And I know that, you know, there's other people that would prefer to blame the unions or the TUC or whoever else there might be out there. I place the blame very squarely with the government. So, and it's only a little things, but I've put those postcards that we developed in Lambeth, I've put them on the chat, and there's also a PDF that links to the order form. And the idea is really much in line with what Vic was talking about, that reps can have them, they can go around their members, they can get members to sign them and to post them off. And if we did get thousands and thousands of those, that would be really good. Another thing we're thinking of doing in Lambeth is looking at advertising space in local papers. How about billboards, a van, like could maybe a few places in London could club together and get one of those ad vans to drive around, or you know, all those sorts of things. I think would be quite exciting and would make members in schools feel quite excited, I think. So I think we should, yeah, that's what I wanted to say really. And if you do want to order those postcards, the image is in there. Alex had the idea on Sunday of doing a Twitter storm as well, so it'd be really excellent from 7 to 8. People could share the images and use the Invest Now hashtag. That would be really brilliant as well. That's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, that's really great, and really important that we get people to just take those small little steps of action so that we can build up to bigger action. So I've got quite a few people with their hands raised, which is great. So Gemma, were you did you have your hand up to speak? Yeah.
Hello, hi. So I'm Corinne's colleague. Nobody gets paid, but we kind of work together. To be frank, we're working kind of 24/7, so I think we've got an excuse to call each other that. So I'm a parent. I've never been a teacher. I got into this through seeing the 5 tests coming across my newsfeed and thinking, that looks sensible. Don't like this government very much. I'm going to back that. And I wrote some stuff. I'm a blogger, really. I wrote some stuff about that, and then I kind of got into it through that. Somebody else's campaign that I joined, I was the second on board. Interestingly, despite the fact that we are a parent campaign that are kind of raging about are schools safe or not, I've sent my daughter in. And that is because the cases are low in my area. And that's very reflective of our position. Exactly what Corinne mentioned about blended learning. So we have a model that we've set up. We actually came up with it a couple of months ago. We've shouted about it, and how much influence we had, I don't know, but actually Independent Sage have come out with something very similar. And that's what I want to put in front of you. I'll explain it briefly, and then I'll put my graphics and stuff in the chat so that you can look at them properly. So when we decided our thresholds, they were schools operate at normal until you get to 1 case per 100,000 of the population in a local area. Now we're revising that to reflect what Independent Sage have done, because to be frank, we took a stab at it on what we could find at the time, not as scientific as we would like. They've now done further work and they've said 10 cases per 100,000. So then you've got blended learning at that point. That was how we put it anyway. We stabbed at 1/3 of pupils in schools at any one time, but actually Independent Sage have said, well, as long as it's bubbles of 15, if you do it with extra buildings or you do it with, you know, part-time attendance, doesn't really matter. The point is, because of aerosol transmission, you only have a certain number of people in a room at any one time, and that reduces your risk. And they say that's between 10 cases per 100,000 and 50 cases per 100,000. And then above 50 cases per 100,000, you should have distance learning. What I'm also going to give you, aside from their models and our model or our sort of bump about it, is I'm going to give you a video, which is an excerpt from Independent Sage do, I'm sure you know, on Friday, a Q&A. And in that Q&A, a few weeks ago now, they messaged us and said, we want your people and people you know to ask us questions. We want children. We want teachers. We had someone on there anonymously who we know well. We want people from the campaign asking us questions. More than half of the people that were asking questions on that particular day were people from our campaign, although you wouldn't necessarily know that from it being mentioned. Stephen Riker, who's a very important figure in Independent Sage, again, I'm sure you know, did a very nice thing. And in one of the questions that was very late on in that particular meeting, he spun the question a bit, because the question, I think, my memory serves me right, was actually about investment, but it was unrelated to that. It was something to do with testing. And then he spun it, and he gave us exactly a minute, a very tweetable minute, of the reason that the thing that the government need to do is fund laptops, fund extra spaces, fund extra staff. You can make this safe, but you can't do it without money, was basically what he said. So I'm also going to put that in the chat, because it hasn't got our name on it. And I appreciate that there is perhaps a political difficulty. I mean, we've started with the name. We call ourselves Brutus now, but inwardly we are boycott, return to unsafe schools. That's got a political issue for schools who are working their hearts out to make schools as safe as they can be. And you can't say, don't send your kids to school. And we get that. But that is our one power. That is the only thing that we can do if we feel it is genuinely not safe for our kids to go into school, is to say we're not going to. But we've got things we can share.
Thanks, Gemma. That's really great. And please do share those links in the chat so that people can click on them. And it's good to have those figures from Independent Sage so that we can arm ourselves with that knowledge. So there's lots of really great discussion going on in the chat, so do make sure that you're keeping an eye on there. Caroline has shared her decolonised curriculum plan that she's been working on, which I'm informed is a really useful read. And I will try and bring Caroline in at some point to talk about that if there's time. And I can see that Alex Snowden has talked about a meeting that he's had with his head, and they've got some small wins coming out of that, just raising small concerns, and got 2 new members to the union. So brilliant, thank you, Alex. If you want to say something, please do put your hand up. I'm going to bring Neil next because Neil has been waiting a long time.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Neil Dandif. I teach at a secondary school in Redbridge. And I wanted to bring up something that's been referred to already in terms of the anti-racism curriculum. I know it's kind of not in chime with what the recent speakers have been talking about, but I really do think it's important we keep that high on the agenda, even though it's very difficult times in school at the moment and people are preoccupied with COVID and what's going on. I think it is important we keep it high on the agenda because it's something that sets our union apart from others. Campaigning and organising and standing up for oppressed groups is a big part of what we're about and why I joined the NEU in the first place. At our school, the head teacher made some really good noises about anti-racism back in July and looking at a top-down kind of revolutionising the school in terms of being explicitly anti-racist. And we thought that might kind of die down a bit when September came, and it has, and it's up to us to keep pushing that, I think. And I think with us, even if SLT don't respond directly, what we've started to do is organise in our union group at school and try to get members to take things back to their departments in terms of progressing their curriculum in their subject areas. But we also do want to keep on at SLT in terms of what they can do outside the curriculum on a whole school level. The heads talked about looking at recruitment processes, to make them more anti-racist and fair in terms of equality, and also the number of black students we have in the behaviour zone or learning zone, as we call it, needs to be looked at as well. So we do want to keep on at him with that. But above all, and somebody alluded to it earlier, it's about the students, isn't it? And talking about their lives and experiences, which is why we want to enrich the curriculum. Not what old textbooks tell them and all the rubbish they go on about empire. And we've mentioned decolonising the curriculum as well. Kids want this. I've had students already this week say to me the stuff they've been reading over lockdown, Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. One of them wants to plan a play on Black history for October, for Black History Month. We want to encourage this. We don't want it to be put on the back burner. I appreciate, and we do in our school as well, understand it's difficult at this time to keep on with these things, but I do think they need to be kept high on the agenda because they affect, it's part of the recovery curriculum, isn't it? Keeping these things uppermost in our lessons and in our classrooms. So I just wanted to briefly to refer to that.
Thanks so much, Neil. This is the kind of thing that we want to, we want to be able to hear from people in schools and what they're doing. And you're absolutely right. We need to keep this on the agenda. And now is the time that we can change our curriculum for the better. And it's long overdue. And you're absolutely right. The kids want this. They want to, be learning about these things that are important to them, that are relevant to them. So yeah, really important. And please do share it in the chat, anybody that's got ideas, and do sign up and join our NEU Left Facebook page and join our mailing list. And we will be saving the chat. I'm saying that to Alex. We're going to save the chat and we'll be able to send out some of these links and some of these resources for people to use in their schools and their districts. So I think I'm going to try and unmute David because I don't think we've heard from David before. So David, are you still there?
Yeah, hello. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm based in Newcastle as I'm an NQT, but I'm working currently through supply at the minute. and I'm doing some one-to-one work in a small school, primary school in Northumberland. It's half form entry. So it's a very small school, but I mean, the staff are doing very well at managing things in terms of bubbles, keeping year groups separate and doing the best they can. But there is that sense that still we're kind of a little bit out of our depth in a way, and having this back to normal forced upon us before it's fully viable or safe. One thing that sticks in my mind right now from the last week is a reception child. I think it was in reception, was turning. I mean, most of the kids have been fine. I mean, it was mentioned it was like a long weekend off, but then there was one child in reception turned up crying because he thought he was going to get COVID and die. And it's, you know, it's an awful situation to see someone in such a vulnerable year group. And I think even with the schools managing as best as they can, there is that issue of, well, where is the plan B? So what happens if there is a case in a school? Does that year group go back? How long for, etc.? You know, my own view is that the school should close if there's one case, because it goes through school. You know, you hear about freshers flu all the time. Whenever I'm in a new school, I always pick up what's going around. So I'm not fully safe. And when Emma spoke at the start about the position of teachers in society, I mean, we need to keep remembering that. I mean, the reason there was such a standoff between the teachers and the government is because teachers were standing in the way of not just getting schools back to normal, but getting workplaces back to normal. That's the reason they sent the early years and the year ones back first, because it was about childcare. And there was a huge national focus from the union about it was no return to schools until it's safe. And we need to have a specific focus now. I think that's what the union needs, with key demands about how we need to have a zero COVID strategy and what would that look like. What is the plan B? Should we have our own? And stuff like that. And also, what's good to hear Black Lives Matter and anti-racist education still being mentioned, because of course what the lockdown also did, it provided an opportunity to look at how education can be done differently. And the curricular stuff is hugely relevant at the minute, this month and next few months, because there's a mixture. There's some schools are saying, well, we've got to maintain a broadly balanced curriculum, but a lot of schools under pressure, they're saying, well, we just need to catch up on the core stuff and narrow down the curriculum. And we need to have a critical view of that and say, well, education is not really about that. It's not just about ticking all the boxes and pleasing Ofsted and all the rest of it. It needs to be something broad, something balanced. The anti-racist education is a tool for that, telling the truth about our history, and basically have a radical, you know, our campaigning as NEU Left should be backed up by that radical view of what education and learning should actually look like.
Thanks so much, David. And I'll just agree with you on your last point there, that we need to be radical. This is the time for change and the time to be radical. So we will be finishing at 7:30. 7:30. So I've got 3 people with their hands up. So if I could just ask the 3 people just to keep your contributions to 1 minute, because we've got a couple of announcements at the end. So I'll bring Tony in first.
Hello. Yeah, thanks. Just 3 points really on the how to keep schools safe. I think teachers should be being tested before they're back in schools, and I think that's a demand we need to be making. Every single teacher should be tested before they go back in and start working. It's obviously the case that if you put people into communities that are hundreds of people at a time, then there are going to be the outbreaks as we've seen. My niece, sorry, I'm a retired teacher, unfortunately, so I apologise for that, but my niece in Birmingham has been back in school a week and she's had to self-isolate because there's been an outbreak there. Secondly, I think we need to, with all of these things, we need to strike while the iron's hot. And when we're talking about a situation where people are talking about a new normal, we need to talk about education as well. I was at a small meeting the other evening called No to the Exam Factory. What kind of education do we want? And I think that's something the NEU Left should probably do a load of meetings around that issue. What do we want for education? And that we need to base it around pedagogy rather than the nonsense that comes from the Tory government. And finally, just on the Black Lives Matter thing, again, that's a current issue. We need to make the most of that. I agree with what Vic and David and Neil were saying. A great opportunity will be the show races and the red card, wear red day on October the 16th. So encourage everybody to get on board with that, but actually pursue anti-racist teaching. And let's get back to the late 70s when we had a lot of that going around. Thanks.
That was great, and thank you for keeping to time, Tony. Some brilliant points there and some ideas for us moving forward. Paul? You've muted yourself, Paul, somehow. There you go.
The 3 quick points I'll try and do in a minute. One, I'm a secondary maths teacher, and it's great to be back in school and doing the job that I'm sure all of you love. And the kids are so happy to be back in school as well. So that's the positive. It's been brilliant. The other positive in my school is everybody in the school, the head has been brilliant, trying to do everything possible to keep the school open. So I can't criticise what the school's done. It's all been agreed by the union. They're trying their very best. What everybody recognises, though, is that without further action by the government, it's a matter of time before it all goes pear-shaped. That's more or less what, including the head SLT, everybody knows that. And that's why I agree strongly with the points made. We have to really bang the drum. Why isn't the government pumping the money in to create more school buildings, the Nightingale School, so we can have the social distancing, the smaller class sizes, more local schools with less travelling? Why aren't they creating incentives to re-recruit teachers who've left the profession back into the classroom to help that process? Why aren't they expanding now teacher training so that we get more new teachers coming on stream? Why aren't they funding local councils to help the people who are being made redundant because of the COVID economic crisis, recruiting them as TAs and support staff to help in schools and provide the morning care, the after school hours care, that wraparound care that so many working class families depend on? They're not doing any of that, and that's why I think it's right that the union starts banging the drum really loud. We're doing our best. Johnson, talks about bloody moral purpose. He wouldn't know morals if he fell over them. Our purpose is to keep our schools open safely, and that's why we're doing everything we can. This bloody government is doing nothing, and we need to turn the fire and the heat on them.
Absolutely. Well said, Paul. Thank you very much for those points. And James, you're our last speaker this evening.
Oh, what a fantastic privilege, you're the final speaker. Yeah, so I'll be very brief. And I just kind of want to reflect on the discussion we've had tonight. And for me, it really emphasises why it is so important that we have an NEU left. Because, you know, the way I see the role of our group is to make the NEU the best trade union it can be, but to also go beyond what trade unions do. And I think, you know, the stories we've heard tonight about kind of NEU members, and NEU left members in particular, taking a lead on industrial action, kind of really, you know, giving working class people the confidence and the ability to shape their workplaces, you know, making people feel, you know, confident and reassured that actually there are people on their side and you can like have a real impact on your workplace. But then also recognizing that the industrial action, the kind of the workplace, the turn to schools is vital, and I don't want to diminish that, but it's not enough. And we do need those political demands as well. I think it's really exciting the work that Jess, and I'm sure it wasn't Jess on her own, Jess and others have been doing on these kind of political issues that we're really raising about investment. And I think it's really, really exciting opportunity to take these forward and to show that, you know, we're able to, we've given people confidence that they can change their workplace. Now, hopefully we can give people confidence that we can win on a national stage as well.
Well said, James. So we had some really great speakers tonight, and thank you so much. And it's really good to hear from people that haven't spoken before, and to hear from people in schools. I thank you, James, for that last contribution. Daniel, I'm going to bring you in last to finish up. Oh, he looks like he doesn't know what he's going to say. About the Black Lives Matter Stand Up to Racism Day of Action tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you, Lucy. Obviously, it's a Black Lives Matter Day of Action tomorrow, organised by Stand Up to Racism. It's really important that we make sure it's not just a moment Dharma says, and we keep driving forward the demands for racial justice. So get in contact with, check out the social media going on from Stand Up to Racism, and do get involved. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Daniel. Sorry for throwing you in there. Thanks everybody. I feel like this has been a really positive meeting, lots to think about and lots of ideas for NEU Left moving forward. So we will be organising more Zoom meetings where we can discuss some of these issues in more detail. Do get involved with all of the campaigns that have been shared, and keep an eye on our Facebook page and our Twitter. And thank you so much for coming, everybody. Good night.